All right, I'm Jeremy Foster. I'm a developer evangelist at Microsoft. It says that there are going to be 2 presenters today. My colleague Gabby woke up sick, so I think I can handle this. But Gabby's great. She's new to our team, and she spent a whole lot of time coming up to speed on this, and she was all ready to go, and she was sick this morning. So if you see Gabby over by the Microsoft booth or something, give her a big "aw, sorry." What's that? Yeah, right. Okay, so we're going to be talking about mastering Node.js modules and packages. What this really is a sort of an entry point into learning Node.js. What I've come to discover is that when people go to learn Node.js, they use one of the, there are a number of really good resources online. Learn You Node, Code School, there are a lot of courses on Pluralsight. And one of the first things that you learn is like how to make a simple web server and how to do this and how to do that. And a lot of times people save this topic of modules and packages until later to learn. And so this whole beginning learning phase, when you're learning Node.js, you're doing these things called requires. You're like pulling in these modules and packages, and you haven't really learned how they work behind the scenes. And so if you've learned a little bit of Node, but you've never really dived into the topic of modules and packages, this will be really beneficial. And if you're absolutely brand new to it, this will be a really good first thing to learn about Node, because then when you go to build a web server and they say, now go ahead and import the HTTP module, you'll say, I know exactly what's going on there. So, yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
What does Node say? The N. Node.
Node.js?
What does it stand for?
Oh, it stands for nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah. Somebody said, hey, what's a good name for my new runtime, my new engine for running JavaScript? I'll call it Node. And he just made that up, Node.js. If you're going to make something in JavaScript, you have to come up with a silly name. That's a law.
It means nothing.
It means nothing. A node is a name for a server, usually. Like if I'm going to create a cluster in the cloud, a farm of servers to do some work for me, I call each of the individual servers a node. And so he might be alluding to the fact that now we have the ability to run JavaScript on a server. Does that make sense? And it's just another runtime. There are lots of runtimes out there. We've got .NET, Ruby, Python, all these different things. There's different ways to run a certain kind of code, and Node is a way to run JavaScript code.
Can I say it's just the JavaScript running on the server?
It is JavaScript running on the server, but let me clear up a myth for you. Node.js is not JavaScript. It's a C++ engine that runs JavaScript for you, okay? So it's a collection of C++ libraries. At the heart of them is one called libuv. It's an open source, cross-platform C library that you can run on almost any device in the world, practically. And it is capable of saying, you give me a JavaScript file, I'm using the Chromium V8 engine, I can execute that JavaScript for you. I know I'm not a browser, but that's okay. I can execute that JavaScript for you. Does that make sense? Good. Yeah, so if you have absolutely no idea what Node is, it's a little bit outside of the scope of this, but I think some things, I think that everything will still be clear to you in the topic of modules and packages, okay? Okay, so this is Gabby, this is me. I already told you who I am. I should note that I'm spending a lot of time in Azure these days because it's fun to do things in the cloud, and I'm spending a lot of time with IoT. This is a fun topic. And I don't really want to leave the subject of Node when I enter IoT. I want to write Node in IoT. So my session at the end of yesterday was using Node.js on IoT devices, and it's surprising a lot of them will support Node. And I have what I call kind of the Node threshold of glory. If I have a device and I can get it up to Node, then all of a sudden I have the tremendous advantage of about 190 or so thousand packages in the Node online repository, in the NPM repository online. 190,000 packages. Almost anything you want to do, it's already been written. Node, unlike some of the other frameworks, is a really light framework. Not a lot, it doesn't do a lot out of the box on its own. Kind of like JavaScript, Which you're like, where's my date time functions? Oh, there's a good library for that. Why would I have to go to another library for that? Shouldn't that be built in? Well, some would say no, it shouldn't be built in. Because if I pull it in from another library, now I've opened it up for competition. Maybe somebody else will make a better one, and I can replace it with that. And now I don't have this overhead of having all of this, these date-time things built into my core framework that I have to spin up. I have to have this runtime. So I think it's a really good way to do things. You guys can always find me online, and I have a podcast where I talk a lot about Nodey things, webby things, IoT things. It's called Code Chat. Just go to codefoster.com/codechat. I actually interviewed a guy from NPM. It's going to be showing here in 2 or 3 weeks, and it was a good chat about a guy that actually works at NPM. It's pretty fun to it was pretty fun to talk to him about their company. NPM is actually a private company that spun off of the Node project a long time ago, and they're just rocking it. They're really cool. Okay, so we're going to assume that you've got maybe some basics in JavaScript. If you don't, you'll still be fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not really going to assume any Node knowledge whatsoever. That said, I'm also not going to cover it, like I mentioned already. I'm not really going to cover the traditional basics of Node. I'm going to jump right in on what are modules, what are packages. And if you have questions about the basics of Node, please feel free to still ask, and I should be able to answer those. But I'm just going to be real responsive on those subjects. And yeah.
You say Node.js has nothing to do with JavaScript. Why do we have to have the basic of JavaScript?
Well, because I didn't say that Node.js has nothing to do with JavaScript. I said that it's an engine that's capable of running JavaScript. And so all the things that we write in Node.js are JavaScript. It's just that the engine itself is not in JavaScript. Some people say Node.js is inherently slower because it's JavaScript. No, it's not. It's a C library. It's very, very fast, right? It's just that your stuff is JavaScript. So what we're going to cover today is modules, packages, and then publishing packages. Okay? Really simple scope. So it'll be nice because we'll be able to spend some time on the definition of a module, the differentiation and definition of a package, and then how you publish things. There's a reason why there are something like 190,000 packages in the NPM repository online, and it is because it's so easy to publish a package. Raise your hand if you have published, if you have created a NuGet package. Okay, this is about 2,000 times easier, something like that, roughly 2,000 times easier. So we'll see that in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to jump right out to npmjs.org and scroll down a little bit and just show you what I'm talking about with this online repository. Look at that, 191,000 total packages. Just a few months ago, I was recording a course for Pluralsight called Node.js and the Internet of Things using Intel Edison. Really fun course. You guys, if you're Pluralsight subscribers, you should check it out. And when I was recording that, it was just a few months ago, I remember this was 130,000. So this is skyrocketing. I mean, it's like up by 10,000 every time I go to it. So this is where you go to get the code that, if you're trying to do facial recognition, you don't write that. You go look in here, and somebody else has already written it for you. If you're looking for a really good date-time parser, you don't write that. You go find one in here. By the way, it's called Moment. It's a really good one. All right, so let's look at our first topic, which is the fact that what we're doing here as developers, the reason why you guys are coming to Code Camp is because you're trying to be awesome in software development, right? You guys don't just want to be standard, you want to be awesome. And there's awesome in every category in life, and I highly encourage you to constantly be seeking more knowledge, constantly be venturing into other topics. If you're a complete Java guy, try .NET. If you're a complete .NET guy, try JavaScript. If you've never tried Ruby, try Ruby. Look at these different languages and explore and learn. There's awesome in every category. I'm going to show you guys some awesome in some various categories, okay? There's awesome in beards, okay? There's awesome in that category, as opposed to not awesome beards. There's awesome in T-shirts. This guy's obviously sat in the wrong position. There's awesome in movie-going experiences. Awesome in airport transportation. Awesome mimery. Awesome security, right? There's awesome security, and we want to be awesome. Awesome daycare. Ouch, that one. And that's what we're striving to do. We're striving to be awesome in our category. We are software developers, and that's what we're looking to do. So, okay, now on to our first topic. So our first topic is modules. What is a Node.js module? Now, I know that module is a very overloaded term. We have hardware modules. You've got modules defined in almost every programming language. It means something different. It means something in Node.js, and that's what I'm going to describe for you. It's very generic, though. It's just a piece of reusable code. It's kind of like classes in other languages, right? You encapsulate things with classes, and you go, this is a thing, and it has the ability to, it's an animal, and it has these descriptors like how many legs it has, and it has these actions like whether or not it can run or jump or whatever. And we get into inheritance. It's a way of encapsulating code. Now, classes are also a way of facilitating instantiation of objects, right? So you can create object-oriented scenarios. Modules are not, by default, facilitators of instantiation. You can create modules that act like classes where you do instantiate them, but by default, that's not what they are. Now, there are three kinds of modules. There are core modules. Those are the ones that, like, when you install Node, you get those, okay? They're built right into the Node engine. You can't not have them. And like I said, they're quite light. Anybody looked through the object browser in the .NET framework? It's extremely rich, right? And it's nice because you take this dependency on the .NET framework and then, man, you have all this functionality. And if you assume that your users have the .NET framework, then when you deliver an assembly, it's minuscule because practically all the code is already on their computer in the form of the .NET framework, right? Well, Node works a bit differently. What they get with Node is not very much, and then everything's delivered in the forms of these modules that come with your application. It's just a different way of doing things. I think both are great. So there's core modules, and then there are third-party modules. This is the one that Frank wrote, and I'm going to use. He published it online, and I'm going to download it and use it in my app. I'm going to take a dependency on Frank's code. I trust him. I've looked into it, and he's got 17,000 stars on NPM, and people are using this. It's a thing, and it's going to be maintained, and he just worked on it last week, so I trust it. And so I'm going to take a dependency on his library, and I'm going to use his third-party module. And then there are local modules. That's one where you go, you know what, I need to organize my code and pull this code out of my main file into something separate, but I don't expect anybody else in the world cares about this because it's domain specific. It's only for my company. It's only for what I'm doing. So I'm going to write it as my own module. We call that a local module or a custom module. Okay? Follow me so far, everybody? Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
Modules, they can be JavaScript or C++, or they have to be JavaScript?
All modules, there's a strange answer to that question. All modules have to be JavaScript, but modules can also basically wrap what we call native add-ins. So you can write it in C, C++, or whatever, but it's always kind of surfaced in JavaScript, and you're consuming it just like any other module, just like this little JavaScript module, but behind the scenes it can be an add-in that you write in whatever. And when it's an add-in, when it's a native module, then it's inherently platform specific, right? So it's possible for me to, you'll find that when you download modules, they'll say this is a pure JavaScript module. That means it doesn't matter what platform you're on because it's just JavaScript. And those are really handy. And they probably make up over 90% of the modules in the store. The vast majority of them are pure JavaScript, which is really nice. But the native modules, we call them, are the ones that are sitting on top of a C add-in. When you install those, you'll see it does a whole bunch of stuff. You'll see Nodejs and Python and everything, because it's trying to install that native module on your device. It's looking and saying, you've got Windows, there you go. You've got Linux, there you go. You've got Mac, there you go. And it installs the one that it needs for the architecture that you're running. Sometimes people create a module for Node.js and they ignore, say, the Windows platform. And then if you're running Windows, it's annoying because you try to install it and it says there was an error. I was expecting a / and I got a / and it didn't work, and that's annoying. But luckily that's a pretty minor percentage of them. Okay, so when you bring these modules in, you use this require keyword. If you do an absolute beginner course in Node.js, almost the first line on the first file that you write is going to be a require. Okay, so I want you to know what exactly require does. The first thing require does is it looks to see if this is a core module. We're going to type this in just a second. So if you type require HTTP, that's one of the core modules, it's done. It's like, I just checked it, that's a core module, that's where I'm going to get it. So it's going to get it from the core modules. Then it looks to, if it's not a core module, it says, well, did you put a path indicator on the beginning of this module name? So did you do ./myCustomModule? If you did, then it knows that that is a local module. So first it looks to see if it's a core module, then it looks to see if it's a local module, and then if it doesn't find that, then it assumes that it's a third-party module. It looks in this special folder here, the node modules. This will be abundantly clear when we do the demo. But it looks in this node modules folder and tries to find it. If it doesn't find it, it says, I couldn't find that module. I looked in the core modules. I looked to see if you indicated that it was a local module. And I looked in node modules, and I can't find it. Well, that might just mean that you need to install it. If it's a third-party module, you have to install it, and that's extremely easy. And by the way, just so you know, it's going to work up this path all the way up to the root of your drive and keep looking at node module folders to see if it can find it. So it creates this recursive architecture where you can have a dependency, you can have a module that's buried, and it's going to climb the tree and find that package and use it anyway. So pretty neat the way that it works. It also looks in what we call the global path, the node path environment variable. There's a place on your computer. If you're in Linux, then it's in whack root, home, or home root rather. If you're on Windows, it's under users, your username, app data, roaming, npm. That's the default for it. It's kind of done for you. And what that is a collection of modules that you want to have on your computer that are not necessarily for a given project. Maybe they're just nice command line utilities that you like to use. And so you want it to be available everywhere. You want it to not care what folder you happen to be in on your command line. You want it to be available everywhere. Now this is a pretty cursory overview, but if you want to get real in-depth information about exactly what I'm talking about here, the definition of a module and how require looks for it, then you can go to this in the official docs. Yeah?
So if I've got a module in Node Modules folder with a particular name on it,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody else in core modules later on duplicates that, I'm not going to get my module to get full.
That's correct. That's correct. The question is, if I create a module, and I have it in my Node Modules folder, and it's called Charlie, and then at some point in time, the Node Foundation decides to create a core module called Charlie, that's going to shadow your Charlie module. Now, those don't change that much. So the likelihood of that happening is extremely low. But if, in fact, they created a core module that conflicted with yours, then it would be on you to change the name of yours, because you can't conflict with the core module names. Otherwise, yours will be hidden. That's correct.
Question.
Yeah.
So if you go to a file, you're essentially walking up toward the root until you find something. If you go to node path, are you also walking up the root, or is that just that single direction?
So the question is, if you go to a file, you're going to be walking up the path. I think what you mean is if you specify a third-party module, it's going to walk up the path looking for it in Node Modules folders. The global is only one folder, however, on your system. So there's no walking to be done there. It just looks in what is configured as the global store of modules, and if it finds it, great, and if not, it's going to throw an error. Because that was the last place that it looked, so it didn't find it, so it's going to throw an error. Okay, so let's look at consuming a core module. We're going to jump over to the command line. By the way, I'll say this quite quickly, but if you are in if you have not installed Node yet on your system, if you're in Linux, you just do apt-get install Node. If you're in Ubuntu or Debian, it's a little bit strange. For some reason, the package in the package manager in apt-get store is called Nodejs, and you should also install Nodejs-legacy so that that's a very simple one that basically just makes it so that the node command works for you. So that's a little bit weird. If you're in Windows, you can use something like we were talking earlier about OneGet or Chocolatey to install it, but I find it easier to just go to nodejs.org. And can anybody tell me how I would download this? Yeah, they make it pretty clear. The large green button that says download for Windows, and that installs both Node and NPM. Okay, so that's the way to install that. So I'm going to jump out to a command line, and I'm in my junk folder. I'm using a shell of shells called Commander that I really like. You can see on the bottom that I have a tab called PowerShell.exe. I'm actually in PowerShell. but I'm doing it in Commander. And it gives me some fun features. It gives me a whole ton of properties and settings. You can see that I'm slightly transparent. You can see my slide behind this. PowerShell does that as well as of Windows 10. But it also gives me the ability to like zoom with control wheel and all kinds of things. So I really like this program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new directory, and I'm just going to call this my first Node app. CD into that. And now I have nothing in there, right? If you're a Windows guy, if you're a DOS guy. I have nothing in there. So I'm going to create my first Node app by just simply creating a JavaScript file. I'm going to create the file by saying touch Indexjs. Much like the default document in a web project is either default.html or index.html, the default document for Node is index.js. Some people use app.js or server.js. Index is the best one to use in my opinion because Node inherently looks for that as the default. So I'm going to go ahead and create this file. Now I have index.js, but it doesn't have anything inside of it. Now I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, which I love being able to launch this from the command line. And I can either edit that file directly, or I can just say code this directory. And I'm basically saying this is my project. It's a folder, but it's a project. I don't have to have an explicit project file, which is nice. And it's going to launch Visual Studio Code. It always launches in like 1 second, which is my favorite thing about it. And here I have this project in context, and so I can click on Indexjs. I'm going to go ahead and drag that project browser all the way over. And here I am inside my first Node app. Now I'm going to require a core module. I'm going to pull in a core module. I'm going to say var HTTP. I could make this whatever I want. This is just my own variable. Equals require HTTP. There we go. So I've pulled in the HTTP module. And if I save this, jump back over to my command line, obviously if I cat my index.js, you can see that it has a line in it. That's great. And now to run this, I just do node, and I could either say node index.js, or Node is smart enough to say index.js is the default. So if I just say node this directory, it says, I know what to do. I'll look for an index.js, and I'm going to find it. Now it ran. It ran successfully. It just didn't do anything, right? All I said was require this thing. But it worked. Versus if I would have misspelled this, it would have said, I can't find module HTTP, whatever. Okay? So let's go ahead and go back to code. Let's say console log HTTP. What do you suppose that's going to do? It's going to serialize that HTTP object and spit it out on the screen, right? There it is. That's the HTTP object. It's really nice working in JavaScript because when it's the language of the web, and so when we go get anything from the web, we almost always have a JSON object, and you're ready to work with it. There's no translation, serialization, mapping, all that stuff. You've got it. And when you want to send something to the web, you just take your local object, make sure that it conforms to what they're expecting, and you just send it to them. So it's really nice, full stack working in JavaScript. I have a project I talked yesterday about. A Node.js on devices project called TweetMonkey, where I use Node.js to talk to the Twitter streaming API. And all my code is like this big. It's like you can almost fit it on one screen depending on your resolution. On this resolution, it would be 2 screens. But it's really short, and yet it's going to Twitter, using OAuth to authenticate, talking to the Twitter streaming API. It's hooking up to what's called a stream in Twitter, where I'm subscribing to a search. And then whenever that search happens, whenever Twitter finds a tweet with a certain search result, it comes back to me and calls this function. And that whole process is extremely easy. Well, TweetMonkey has an older brother that I didn't mention called CommandMonkey. And with CommandMonkey, I can take my Microsoft band and say, monkey, dance. And he dances. He does his little animation. The way that works is the band goes to my phone, goes to a service in Azure, goes down to the device. And the fun thing about that project is that the whole thing is JavaScript. JavaScript on the phone, JavaScript in the cloud, JavaScript on the device. And when you're in JavaScript the whole way, everything's really short and really easy. I really love that space. Yeah?
Can all servers run JavaScript?
All servers?
Yes.
For the most part, yes. I'm sure there are edge cases, but they're impractical. Almost every server can run JavaScript, to the point where almost many small devices can run JavaScript. I mean, we're talking about Raspberry Pis, no problem. Intel Edisons, the size of an SD card, no problem. So a lot of devices can run JavaScript. And that's that node threshold of glory I mentioned. If it can run Node.js, then all of a sudden this world of ease opens up to you, which is really nice. Okay, so that was consuming a core module, very easy. Now let's consume a third-party module. Conceptually, as far as your code is concerned, it's very much the same. I'm going to leave that one there, and now I'm going to say var moment. This happens to be something that some very smart developer wrote. It's a really good parser for dates and times. It allows you to do things like radio check. Whoa, that works. Is this going to work temporarily? Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'll keep rolling, though. So if I want to parse a date and time that's something like 9/1/2015, you've all run across good date time parsers that do that. But how about if I want to parse something that's like 2 days from a week from tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or in 2 hours, like written in human language, not just numbers and slashes and dashes and stuff like that. We've got really cool libraries like that. So if you want to pull in moment, all of a sudden in your app, you're able to give somebody a text field where they enter next Thursday, and you know exactly what date that is. How about 2 hours from next Thursday, or 2 days from next Thursday, or whatever? Things like that can open up. So let's go ahead and use that one. I'll say require. I'll actually spell it right, too. That'll help. And now, let's comment that out for now. Let's jump over here, and can anybody tell me what's going to happen when I node this now? Yeah, error. I can't find this module moment. I had no trouble finding HTTP because it's built in, but I can't find moment. So what do I have to do? I have to install it. That's where NPM comes in. There's this synergistic relationship between Node and NPM. Node is the engine. NPM is the package manager. It handles all things modules and packages. So it's critical to our subject today. So I say NPM install moment. I have to specify that moment is the package that I want to install. And notice that I'm using the word package here. We haven't gotten to the packages section. Technically, what I'm installing is not a module. It is a package, and I'll be really clear about the differentiation on that in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. It's now going to the interwebs. Yes, sir. That's right. I could either install it globally or locally, and it would work. But if I installed it globally, then it's not really a part of this project, right? And if moment is something that this project uses, I want it local. I want it with me. And in fact, when we get into packages, you'll see that I want to save the fact that this is a dependency of this project. Global is something that you use when, say, like Microsoft Azure allows me to use Node to maintain my services. I can go create websites, I can spin up VMs, shut them down, all these things, and I can do all of that using a Node module called Azure CLI. It's like the command line tool that works on Windows, Linux, Mac, everything, for commanding your cloud subscription. Well, that is not something that I want to put into any given Node project. It's something that I just always want to be able to do on my command line. Like here I am in this project, sure, but if I type Azure, it's going to say, yeah, I recognize Azure. Azure's this tool that you have. So Node kind of spans these two worlds. It's a really good command line utility engine. It's also a really good engine for running the JavaScript that's inside of your app. We had a couple questions. Yeah?
So you mentioned about Memento, right? So it's one of the package. But my question is that how do you find out, the definition of those packages? What are the inbuilt capabilities of those
Yep, absolutely. So the question is, Moment is a package that I pulled in. Where do I go discover those packages? And we'll get to that in a little bit when we get into the packages. Yeah? Where does it install it? That's what we're going to look at right now. Awesome question. So I just did npm install moment. If I would have said npm install moment -g for global, it would have put it in that node path folder, okay? But here I said just simply npm install moment. Well, now if I do an ls, I see that I have a new folder, node modules. If I go into node modules, I have a moment folder. So I have one module, right? Wrong. I have many modules underneath moment. Moment's going to have dependencies. If I go into moment and list, lo and behold, they just made a liar out of myself. Moment apparently doesn't have any dependencies, which is kind of cool. But let me go back up and say npm install express. This is a very popular web framework in Node. It allows you to create websites real easily. And Express, I happen to know, has a whole bunch of dependencies. There you can see what exactly was installed. So now let me go into my node modules folder. Now I go into Express, and it itself has a node modules folder. And it has all of these as dependencies. Sometimes when you move into the world of Node, you're surprised at just how many dependencies certain things have. Because of the nature of it, each of these things does one small thing. Yeah? There very well may be duplicates. When it climbs the tree, it'll basically, the reverse recursive nature of it will mean that it's going to pick the one that the package creator wants the most. If he brings one local, it'll use his. Otherwise, it'll use another one that you have defined in your project higher up. So, yes, sir.
One of the things that is that, let's say if you have a library which is dependent on the older version of the dependent library.
Right.
And you have downloaded another one which is dependent on a newer version.
Yeah.
These are the same. So how does it resolve,
The versions.
the newer version or the older version? Because it needs both, because the
That's right.
package doesn't even know about the newer version.
So the question is, how do we handle versions? What if I have a dependency on Moment, but not Moment 2.3? I need Moment 1.8. Well, when we get into the packages section here in a little bit, you'll see that a package is basically defined by a package metadata file. It's called package.json, and we'll see that soon. And in there, you describe your dependencies, and when you describe a dependency, you have good control over what version it needs to be. You get to say it has to be exactly 1.8.1. Or it can be anything after 1.8.1. Go ahead and get the latest one. Or you can say it has to be 1 dot, major version of 1, but 8 or 9, whatever, just get the latest minor version. So you get really good control over exactly what version you're dependent on. And then if that's not fulfilled anywhere else, then you're gonna have that version in your node modules folder, so you've got fine control over exactly which version you're gonna use.
If I have a direct dependency on a module, and then I say, okay, I'm dependent on 1.8.1, for example.
Yes.
And then you're downloading another module which has a dependency on, let's say, the higher version. Now, that library will have require on the higher version. I have a direct require on my lower version. Now, when I'm running my application, so how does the Node engine resolve?
Well, so the question is, what if I have two modules and they are dependent on different versions of it? Well, those dependencies are described recursively inside of those modules subfolders. So we don't have to worry about that by default. In fact, the thing that we have to worry about with Node is, what if I want to share the same exact Node modules folders? And with the latest version of Node that's coming out, of NPM that's coming out soon, it actually uses a really interesting trick to flatten the directory structure and be smart about keeping multiple versions, but introducing the ability for it to share them. But the problem that you raise with, what about my two modules that are dependent on different versions? It's not a problem at all, because they maintain their own completely separate instances of those submodules and their versions. Okay, let's move. So I created, let's flip back to Visual Studio Code here, and I created this moment, and it should now work because I've installed it. So now let's node this directory, and it says no problem. And in fact, if I console log moment, It works. And it's spitting out this moment object. Okay, so what about creating and consuming a custom local module? Let's give that a shot. I'll switch back to code here, and I'll actually use the, as opposed to just using touch and doing it at the command line, sometimes I bounce back and forth between my IDE and here. Well, now let's say I want to bring in something called a circle calculator. I'm just going to create a circle calculator. And I'm going to require something local, okay? It's going to be called circle, let's just call this calc. Okay, so I've got a thing called calc that I want to create and bring in. Now, can you guys see what I've done wrong already? That's right. If I don't specify a path indicator at the beginning, then it's going to look and say it's not a core module, it's not a third-party module, it's not in your global, I can't find this thing called calc. We have to tell it, oh, this is mine. And I can do it with a relative path like that. I can climb the directories, whatever. I can find this as however I want. I can even use an absolute path, although that's not recommended. It's good to make your whole application relative so that it's more portable. Okay, so I'm going to bring that in, and then I'm going to, at first, I'm just going to spit this thing out, just like we were with the other ones. Now, we really don't need these. I'll just go ahead and comment those out so they're not in our way. I want to bring in this thing called calc. Well, now to create that, I'm just going to come over here and create calc.js. By the way, this Visual Studio Code is cross-platform. It works on Windows, Mac, Linux. You can actually spin up Linux X, install Visual Studio Code, and use it there, no problem. And it's really slick. Like I said, it opens usually sub-second. I've never seen it take more than 2 seconds to open, so that's what absolutely thrills me. And it's got some really good features like debugging, Git integration, and task runner integration, which is really nice. I can do things like, I can come up here and say, what can I do with task? So I can just run a task. And so I say something like task, my task, and whether it's a gulp task or a grunt task or whatever, it's going to run it. Really, really cool environment. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Why is the name Index.js? Because I see this very often.
Yeah.
Why?
The question is, why is this called Indexjs? It's a convention. It's a convention to call your entry point to your Node project Indexjs. And it's such a convention that Node recognizes it. Built into the engine, it looks for a file called Indexjs and says, if you don't tell me where your entry point is, I'll choose this. Just like if you're writing a C++ application, you have a main function. And you don't have to go configure that main as your entry point. It looks for something called main and says, I'll start there. It's got to start somewhere, right? When you boot your computer, it's got to start somewhere. Okay, so in here, I need to create a custom module. Custom modules are very simple. There's one concept that you need to know, and that is that you have something injected into here called module, and you can access it. So I can say module exports. Module has a property on it called exports, and whatever I set module.exports to is what this export returns. Okay? It's a pretty simple concept. So if I say module exports equals 3, that's going to work just fine. This is a complete, although very silly module. Okay? Now what you'll normally do is you'll set it equal to some value like this, and you'll return some things. So let's return an object. This is a calculator. Let's say we want to have a property. So we're going to have the pi property. And we're going to do pi 3.14, let's get more specific, 3.1415926535897993264332387483279279. That's close enough for me. And now I'm going to have a function, area. An area is a function of a radius that's going to come in. And in this function, how do I calculate the area of a circle based on the radius? Pi r squared would be the circumference. 2 pi r. So 2 times r times this dot pi. I have to refer to it as this. That's the thing inside of this same object. So there we go. I've written myself a pretty nice little calculator that if I tell it a radius, it's going to calculate the area for me. So I'll save that, jump back over here, and now instead of console logging out the calc, actually let's go ahead and console log that out, and then let's console log the result of calc.area of 7. Okay? Give that a try, see if it works. And it says, I can't find the module //calc. You guys let me leave 2 dots in there. It's right here in this same folder. It's not up a folder. It's in it. You saw it, didn't you? You saw it. What's that? Semicolon. You know what? I think it would be optional right there. The JavaScript engine still has an optional semicolon. Sometimes it bites you. I'm always explicit about it. All right, let's node this. So there's our object, and why did we get undefined? That wasn't supposed to happen. Oh, you know what? You guys, we're not paired programming if you don't give me feedback here. We need to return this value from this function. Otherwise, a function that doesn't return anything, first of all, it's just fine in JavaScript. Very, very forgiving, which burns us. It's very forgiving, and if you write a function that doesn't return anything, then the return value is just simply undefined. Area. Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Dang it. Shoot. Hey, no comments from the back. So you're saying that I didn't memorize pi to the 30th digit correctly? Let's try this again. 1415926535897932326433238468327 Is that correct? Can you look that up for me? Okay, thank you. Okay, and this is, you know what I'm going to do is the easy way out here. I'm going to call this the circumference. And let's just, yeah. I'm just going to change the requirements, all right? I know better than my customer what he wants. So and look at this. IntelliSense on that function, is that glory or what? Oh, there's so much glory. Actually, in Visual Studio Code, this is more of a node concept. There's a project called TSD that, I'm jumping ahead. This is just a freebie. I'm going to say npm list global with a depth of 0 and show you what my globally installed packages are. And this one on the bottom, TSD, allows me to pull in TypeScript definition files, and Visual Studio Code can use TypeScript definition files to give you really good IntelliSense, like strong typing, on any node project that has a TSD file, which is a lot of them. So now in here, remember I installed Express. I did an npm install Express. I could say, for instance, TSD install Express, and it's going to go look in the TSD. It's actually looking at a GitHub repo and saying, oh, there is a TypeScript definition file for Express. I'm going to install that for you into this folder called Typings, which will appear in just a second. There it is, Typings. Express is in there. And now when I use Express, have you guys used like C# with all the strong typing? It's like heaven, right? And then you move to JavaScript and you're like, wait, what? Now you get it. Now you get all of that really, really rich typing. So that was just a freebie. That was just on the side there. Okay, let's move on. By the way, I just returned what's called the namespace pattern. I returned an object that had a property and a function, right? That is the simplest pattern in JavaScript, but there are all these patterns for what your modules can return. And a lot of people, instead of just returning a namespace, they'll return a function. And the function may be a high-order function or a constructor function or a singleton function. These 4 are kind of all very similar. But a lot of people will return a function, so what you get back from your require, you instantiate with it, or you otherwise call that directly. Okay, so you'll see these different patterns for what can be returned. In my opinion, this kind of makes the module pattern more rich, or a superset of the class analogy that I brought up earlier. So that's kind of cool. This I pulled from this post. By the way, all of my slides today, actually there's this in my TweetMonkey deck I put in the same OneDrive folder, and you can access them at this short URL, and this will stay on the screen, so you don't have to write it down right now. Anyway, so you can go here and you can click on that and get all this information about those different patterns. Okay, so now let's talk about packages after a question. Yeah?
Actually, the Azure has the web app.
Yep.
So is Google App Engine.
Yep.
Use web app. What is this for? If all these servers run JavaScript, why do I need it?
So the question is, I see that Azure and Google App Engine will both run web apps. What is that? And if I have JavaScript engines, why would I need that? In short, web apps is just web projects running in the cloud and handling a lot of the hard stuff for you, like the setup of your whatever your server engine is, whether it's Node.js or IIS or Nginx or whatever. And you need it because this, and Node.js is hosted in a web app. It has to be hosted in something. And so on Azure, you can go create a web app and publish a Node.js file. Like, you don't have to publish anything else about it except, like, you could just put an Indexjs file up. And it'll say, this looks like a Node.js project to me. And it will run that in the web app using Node as the engine. So it's like the cloud container that contains the Node runtime that runs your JavaScript. Is that clear? Cool. Okay, so packages need to be defined and differentiated from modules. When I first got into this, I was talking to somebody and I was like, oh yeah, well, modules, packages, same thing. And he was like, no, they're not the same thing. Packages are containers for modules. They contain one-to-many modules. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Usually, I just have one module. And he said, that's right. In most of them, you only have one module, but it's important to differentiate the two. And that's exactly, what he said is exactly right. A package becomes like an envelope with a metadata file that says, hey, I am a Node.js package. I contain this module. I also might contain these 3 others. And here's some information about me. The important things is that it's versioned. So all the versioning needs to be well described so that when somebody creates a dependency on your package, on your module via your package, they can very explicitly describe exactly what version they want or need. It defines all of the dependencies of yours. So when somebody grabs your package as a dependency, you get a chance to say, and I depend on this, 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 and this. And so when they install it, it's going to also install those recursively. It's usually published online. That's the delivery mechanism for these packages. I push it up into the store online. Other people pull it from there. I could just hand it to you on a floppy drive, but you know, it's 2015, by the way. So a package is defined by the presence of a package JSON file. That makes it really, really easy to turn your Node app into a package, a Node package. Let's go back to my command line, and we have created this super cool, super useful thing called the circle calculator with a little bit of help from the peanut gallery in the back. Thank you. And I've got my typings, I've got my Node modules, I've got my calc.js, I've got my Indexjs. Great, I'm ready to deliver this to you or you or you, right? Wrong. I don't have a package to describe the version of this, to describe the modules in it, and to do some other stuff. Now, to create a package, it's really easy. I create a package.json file, I look up the JSON schema, I make sure I get all the properties right, I fill out the property values, blah, 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 or I just use npm init. Now, npm init, remember I told you npm handles the whole packaging story? That's what it's for. It's its whole job in life. It doesn't do anything else. And npm init walks me through a command line wizard for creating a package for this current directory where I'm in. So it says, oh, I noticed you're in a directory called my first Node app. That sounds good for a name, right? Yeah, sure. Enter. How about version 1? Is that a good place to start? Yeah, sure. How about a description? Blah. How about the entry point? Okay, now I don't have to define an entry point, but it's nice to do it explicitly. Indexjs is my entry point. I also have calc.js, right? Is that where I start? No, that's one of my local modules. I want to start at Indexjs. What's the test command? Skip it. Git repository? I don't have it in GitHub yet. Skip it. Keywords? Do I want people to find this? I need to enter some good keywords. That's a good idea. What's the license for this package? That's another role of a package, of the package metadata file is to describe what the license is for this. I use Apache 2 by default, so I set that up as my default, so whenever I run this, that's what it's going to use. And then it says, okay, I created this package JSON file for you. Does this look good? Sure. And now I have a package.json file. Really easy. And by the way, if I delete this package.json file, I can also say npm init -y, meaning use all my defaults and just make it for me. Don't walk me through that silly wizard. And now I have a package.json file that looks like that. Super, super easy. And I just turned my module into a package. Okay? Any questions on that? You guys understand that? Okay, now I have some dependencies in here, right? I have this dependency on calc, which is one that I created. And if I jump back to here, I'm going to say, you know what? Let's take this dependency on moment. I'm not actually using it right now, but that's fine. I'm going to pretend like that's one of my dependencies. Well, now let's delete this entire Node Modules folder. And now let's look once again at my package.json file. And when I created that with npm init, notice it said, I noticed that you have a Node Modules folder that has express and moment in it. So I'm going to go ahead and define those as dependencies. But that was a real convenience that it created those for me. But let's actually go to Visual Studio, go in here and delete those dependencies. Let's pretend like it wasn't able to do that for me, or I hadn't installed those yet. So what I want to do is I want to say, in this application, like if I run this, it's going to say, you don't have moment. Okay, I need to install moment, right? We did this already. But moment is something that I am taking on as a dependency of this project. I need it. I'm going to need it in the future. So I say save. And what that does is, let's go over here and look at my, notice I deleted the dependencies property in my package file here. I'm going to hit save, and it's going to say, okay, I'm installing moment for you, and I put it into your package.json as a dependency. I can also remove, shortcut is R, by the way. I can also remove and save, and it pulls it out. Let's go ahead and put that back in. Okay, how many times do I have to do that to make sure that we know it? We're done. Yes?
If you save it without a package.json file existing, it's just going to blow up on you?
It just fails silently. It doesn't do anything, yeah. I wish that it would init with yes and save it as a dependency. That would be cool, but I'll talk to my friend at NPM. I was telling everybody, I think before a lot of you got here, that I have a podcast called Code Chat, and I interviewed a guy that works at NPM, and it's been fun knowing him because I can say, hey, why does this work this way? And he's like, oh, I'll go ask Jim. See why it works that way. Yes?
In the screen, you have scripts. What do you mean scripts here?
Where? Here?
Yeah, here.
Okay, so I'll answer this quickly because it's a bit of a rabbit trail, but in this package JSON, if you go to NPM's documentation, there's a lot of functionality that you can drop in here. It's really nice. You can define arbitrary scripts, and then using NPM, you can run those scripts. So it's good for a DevOps story. They've got test there, but you can have whatever other scripts you want. You can almost like replace gulp. You know, it can almost treat it. I would still use gulp, by the way, but you can almost treat that as your task runner, as all the things that need to happen to condition or test or build or deploy or otherwise run your application. Okay, so where are we? We added dependencies. We removed and installed those dependencies. Package repositories, I told you about npm.js, and somebody asked the question. I told you we'd get to it soon. Where do I go and discover those packages? I go here all the time. npm, I don't go to nmp.js, npmjs.org. npmjs.org is the website for the package store, okay? Now, the package store, you normally interact with it from the command line. I want to install, I want to search, or whatever. You can do it from there, but you can also go to the web here, and you can say, well, what about this moment one that we've been working with? Search for it, and it says, well, there's moment right here. And look at this, 243 stars. That's really good. And if I really drill into it and look at it, I can see what version it's at, who the contributors are, how many times it's been downloaded. Look at this. In the last month, 2.5 million times. This one is very, very active. Here are the dependents. There's almost 4,000 people that are dependent on this, which doesn't sound like a lot if it's been downloaded 2.5 million times in the last month. But so this is telling you what you use this for is this the thing that I want to create a dependency on? Or do they have their stuff together, or is this some fly-by-night that made something called moment and it has a few functions in it and nobody really uses it? From this page, you get to really see if this is something that you want to use, okay? So I go here all the time, and the other thing that's nice about it is it tells you, and by the way, here's where it is on GitHub. So this is an open source project. I can jump right over there to the source, and I can go create an issue for it. So I'll actually, when I'm dealing with, somebody tells me there's this really cool node module called Moment, go check it out. I'll go here, look at the stars and everything. I can star this myself. Yeah, I like this one. And, oh, I'm not logged in, so it's going to ask me to log in. Close your eyes. Okay, so I have, whoa. Have you seen this wombat? It might actually have worked and logged me in. I can't apologize for their errors. Oops. Did that work? Yes. No. Fail. Okay, doesn't matter. Anyway, so I can star this myself and say, yeah, I really like this package, this module. So do you guys see how it gets sometimes it gets confusing. What's the module? What's the package? Moment is both a package and a module. Let's jump out to its GitHub. My mouse is where? Luckily, I have a touch screen. There it is. Okay, so if I go out here and I look, now these guys followed a different convention. Remember I told you Indexjs is the default entry point. Well, these guys said, well, let's make our entry point moment.js. I don't know. I've seen that. People use the package name as the name of the JavaScript file that is the entry point. But that's going to have to be defined now because NPM doesn't say moment is the default entry point. So if we go look at the package JSON for this, notice the main. That's saying moment is the entry point for this. That's how that's where we begin with running this. But notice all the stuff that's in their package JSON file. You can tell that there's a lot of stuff I'm leaving out of a presentation with this scope. You can put all the contributors, the author, where the home page for it is and everything. Okay, now repositories are places online where you can go get your node modules. You can install them. And so far, whenever I hit install, those come from NPM. But NPM is a group of good people, and they said, let's not just make everybody do things our way. A lot of people store their stuff in GitHub, right? So let's let them use GitHub as a definitive source for the location of their packages as well as NPM. Now, NPM is far better than GitHub at delivering final packages. So I would choose that as your means to deliver final package. That's exactly what it's made for. But if you've got something in GitHub, maybe you've got a private GitHub repository that your team shares, and you want to put a module there in GitHub, and you want to use that as your package source, you can do that. As a matter of fact, all you have to do is at the command line, remember when I said npm install moment? Did anybody notice what Moment's GitHub repository was called? It was moment/moment, right? And Moment is their username on GitHub, and Moment is the name of this one. If I say something/something, NPM says, oh, you're getting this from GitHub, aren't you? By default, if you say something/something, it says, okay, I'm going to go on GitHub to https://github.com/moment/moment.git. That's the URL for that repo on GitHub, and I'm going to pull it down from there. Now, there's more freedom there on GitHub. You can have whatever you want in your GitHub repo. We're going to expect that if you're trying to install a node package from here, that you're going to have a package JSON file, you're going to have an entry point. It's got to look like a node package. Whereas you're forced into that when you put it in NPM. In GitHub, you're not, so you better conform. Otherwise, this is going to blow up with red and say, I went and looked at GitHub where you told me to, and it didn't look like a node package, so I can't install that. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to move on. Okay, so we looked at requiring a module by specifying the name of its package. And what it does is it looks at that entry point and pulls that in. But I told you that a package can contain more than one module. I shouldn't say oftentimes does. Sometimes does. If you want to use the other modules that are inside a package, you have to know something about it. You can go look them up in the source code or whatever. But basically, you just use the name of the package, and then you append the path to the different modules that are in it. So it's kind of a convention to have a lib folder with a number of JavaScript files in it that are the different modules that this package contains. And so I could require my module, but then I could also require my module /lib/ another module that's in the same exact package. Okay? That's all I'm saying on that. It's not very common, so yeah.
Can we have our own local repository, like you said, either you can go to NPM or you can go to GitHub. So let's say if I'm using very older version and they have been making changes and they have been upgrading it,
Yeah.
I don't know whether they will have the lower version that I'm using on the GitHub or for that matter in NPM repo. Can I have my own local repo where I will install it, and then whenever I have a need of upgrading it to a newer version, I can always download my local repo and have my reference to local repo rather than going to the
The question is, can I have a local repository? There's a couple of ways to do that. First of all, NPM has just like GitHub has the concept of a public repository and a private repository, and you have to pay for the private repository. NPM, same thing. If it's public, it's free. You can have private repositories, and then you could share that you could just keep that repository for yourself. I think it's something like $7 a month, or you can use that for your team. And they also recently, I don't know if it's completely introduced, but he told me I'm allowed to tell you that they recently introduced something called organizations. So you can create organizations and use that to kind of organize your company or whatever. You also can install a package from local. Now, it's not necessarily, it's a little bit more brittle in my opinion, but you can just, where I said you can npm install something from the npm repository or something to get it from GitHub. You can also npm install a local path, and it'll expect it to look like a node module, and it'll bring it in. I'd never do that, and I don't like it because, like I said, it's a little bit brittle. What I would recommend is that you get a private repository or do something called npm linking, which I'm going to show you in just a second.
because otherwise, my build will all of it start breaking because I don't want to build off.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
it makes so much very difference.
I think a better thing to do in that exact case is npm linking, and we'll see that real soon. So, okay, I think we're running a little bit short. There's a number of package conventions. I'll skip this kind of. You saw the lib. This is the only one that must be there, package.json. That defines a package. Everything else in your node package is by convention. It can look like kind of whatever. I was going to take you into Express in a moment and show you how they do or do not follow the conventions, but I'm going to kind of skip that. Installing packages. These build slides I forgot to fix, so they're all goofy. So you can install, we already looked at that, all save does is put it in your package.json file. If you want to install something globally, you add the -g. So gig is a really nice node module that generates gitignore files for you. Have you ever said, I want to start a Python project. What's a good default gitignore file for Python? Well, you can go online and find it and copy it and paste it in a text editor and save it and check it in, blah, blah, blah. Or you can just say gig generate Python. And it goes, there you go, there's your gitignore file. It's really, really nice. I use gig generate node all the time. It creates me my gitignore file for node. It ignores things like the node modules folder, which you don't want to check into your source control. Very, very nice. So that's one that I want to install globally. I want to use that anywhere, wherever I'm at. npm install production is really nice. That ignores the dev dependencies. So you have this ability, remember when I said --save? --save saves it into your package.json in the dependencies section. But --save-dev saves it into the dev dependencies section. So something like gulp or grunt or jshint or lint or whatever you use as a developer for your stuff, that doesn't need to be that doesn't need to be installed when it gets to the production server. So you save it as a dev dependency, and then on the production server you run this line. And that says, I'll just install the real dependencies, not the dev dependencies. This is depth 0. That's a typo. That's supposed to have 2 dashes. Depth 0, you saw me do when I listed off mine. If I say npm list, it shows me all of the dependencies in my current directory, but it shows them in a full tree, which is sometimes very nice, and sometimes it's just too much info. So here I am in my first app. So I'm going to say node or npm list, and it's going to say, okay, here we go. We have a dependency on moment. Now, if I had Express, then I would see a full tree with all of them. In fact, I'll say npm install Express, and we'll just pretend that that's a real dependency, so we're going to save it. This should be very fast because I installed it just a little bit ago, and it caches them, which is a whole nother topic that we're not talking about. So like I said, this should happen really fast. So anyway, when I list this, it's going to list Express and then a little subtree. It's going to show all of its dependencies and their dependencies and their dependencies. So there's this really cool tool called Yeoman that you can do scaffolding. And so you can say something like Yo Web App and it'll create you a web app. Very, very nice. It's hilarious though, because when you say Yo Web App, the dependencies that you get in just the default web app or the default Angular web app or these default templates in Yeoman have something like 30,000 node modules. If you look at the full tree, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm used to tens or maybe hundreds of packages that make up my project, but tens of thousands? That's amazing. Okay, let's kind of move on here. By the way, I use this list G all the time to see, like, have I installed that yet? Is that in my globals? Whatever. You can remove packages by simply saying remove. You can also remove them and take them out of the package JSON file with that save. And by the way, a lot of these have shortcuts. So R, is, like you saw, was a shortcut for remove. So you can just npm R and then the name of your package. Oh, you know what? I really should have put the name of the package right there. npm remove package. Otherwise, you know what? So this is an issue that I pushed back to the npm team, and they came back to me on. This has an effect. Can anybody guess what that effect is? If I just say npm remove. They would love this feedback. Like, what do you think remove should do if you call it on its own? I'll tell you what it does. It says, okay, you have a package here that you're in. If you say npm remove, it removes this package if it's globally linked, which we haven't talked about yet, so maybe this is hard to understand. It removes the global link from your global area. So it actually has an effect. It happened to me, and I was like, wait, what? Okay, so this is linking, and this is really nice. If I'm working on this, my first Node app, right, and I want to use it, and this is going to address his question about if I have something locally on mine and I want to use it, how do I do that? Well, here I am in my first, oh, come on, you're killing me. Here I am in mine. If I say npm link, okay, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my node path. So I'm going to users, thank you. Is it roaming now? Yes, roaming npm. This is the location of my globals, right? You guys remember when I listed my globals and that's what they were? I think we have 6 minutes left, is that right? So here they are, and now I'm going to go here and I'm going to say npm link. I'm in a Node app, and I'm going to say npm link. This means like me, npm link me. When I do that, a symlink is created in here, which means that from elsewhere, if I want to use this package that I just created, I can do that by simply installing, or by simply referencing it, or what I can do is I can go to, what's better to do, is to say npm link, and then I refer to my first Node app from here, and I'm linking to that one via the global directory. So now if I go into, I'll just do it this way. If I go into my Node modules, I have this my first Node app in here. Now I'm using it, but it's all just symlinks. I'm actually using it from that other place. And so that's really handy. If you forget it, just remember npm link and go look it up in the documentation. But that's what it's for, and it's really, really handy. And then you can npm unlink to pull those out. Okay, publishing packages. This is short and easy. Like I said, this is one of my favorite things about Node and npm is that getting packages into the store is extremely easy. First of all, npm login. It's the same as npm add user. From the command line, if you say npm login, it's like username, Fred. Password, password. Enter. You just created a user in npm. In fact, if you go to npmjs.org, their website, you can log in using Fred now. Okay, so it's the same user on the command line as it is in their website. And you log in to log in, and what that actually does is it creates a .npmrc file in your user profile, and it stores an authentication token. So that from now on the command line, you don't have to log in anymore. It's going to remember it. But it's also not storing like a base 64 of your password, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm gonna say npm logout is pretty obvious. Now, once you have done this and created yourself a user, it opens up the ability to go to the web, log in, do all the stuff on npm.js that you might want to do, like see your stars or add a star. You can also npm star on the command line, so I can npm star express and say, I like express, which I use that a lot, actually, because it's really nice to, when I reload on a new system or something and I want to go reinstall my global node modules, I'm like, what do I like? What are the ones that I want to install? And so I'll go look at my list of stars and install those ones. So once you're installed, or once you're logged in, rather, to publish a package, you do this. npm publish. That's it. That's it. All you need, here are the minimum requirements for publishing a package. It needs to have a package JSON file, and that package JSON file needs to have a name and a version. Done. That's it. So I was blown away by this because I've kind of already written my project. I've described it with this one file, and now it's already ready to go. Let's go back out here. I'm not going to do this because it's just kind of rude to publish packages that don't add value to anybody's lives. But if I go to this package, if I say npm publish right now, it would work. It would actually push it into npm. I would be able to go out to npm.js and search for it, and I would find it. So, really? Is that true? I'm not connected? Is that true? Are you doing this to me? My jetpack. There we go. Okay, I would be able to go here, and for instance, I've published one called Candyman, and let's see, published by codefoster. I can go to it. You can all go to it right now and hit star for me. There's the version. There's where it exists on GitHub. This is my little description of it. And there are a few things that are, oh, and by the way, you can unpublish it. I'll finish my thought on the next slide. When you unpublish, you can never fully unpublish something, but if you say unpublish, then it's effectively nobody's going to be able to use it. They're not going to see it. But the reason why I say you can never fully unpublish something is if I publish something that is Candyman at version 1, and then I unpublish Candyman at version 1, and then I come back and I say, oh, I want to publish Candyman at version 1, it's going to say no. That at some point in the past, that's been done already. You can never, ever, ever do that again. So be careful with your publish because you can never fully undo it. That version number is reserved forever in NPM. You can also deprecate packages, which is really handy. You can give people a message that says, we had to deprecate this one because we found out that, whatever. And then people know not to use this one, but it's still there. You don't totally break their stuff. Now, there's some best practices when you're publishing. Do have a readme.md because that's what's used on npmjs.org to describe your thing. So you saw my Candyman one. I have a little sample code, how to use it, stuff like that in there. Increment your semver. There is a utility in npm. You can just say npm version major, and it will increment the major version of your package. npm version minor, npm version release. And all of Node packages, all of NPM uses semver. You have to conform to semver for your semantic versioning, for your versions. Don't publish placeholders. I have 2 placeholders published before I knew the etiquette. But don't publish something because you want to reserve the name and you haven't made anything in it yet. Have something before you put it out there. And also make sure that you have a link to GitHub or to your your source control, wherever it is, and be sure to check your issues. You want to maintain your package well so that people will actually use it. This, we're done. This is my team that's here at CodeCamp. If you find any of these people, they'll kind of be able to point you to the others that are here. So if you have a question about gaming, I won't be able to answer it, but I'll be able to point you to one of my colleagues who can. So it's a pretty cool team. I really like my colleagues. We have a number of MVPs here as well. Raise your hand if you're in the audience and you're on screen. Anyone? Anyone? All right. Our MVPs know everything about Node, so they didn't come to this. So yeah, you can go over to the booth and get a free book if you fill out a survey, and you can play with cool devices. And there is a raffle today. I'm not sure exactly when, but if you fill out the survey, which is at aka.ms/svcc at lunchtime, thank you. If you go here right now and fill that survey out, you'll be entered to win a Dell Inspiron 2-in-1 and or a Microsoft Band. So good. All right. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of Code Camp. Appreciate it being here.